Listen, as someone who has been rooting for Kevin Costner to return to filmmaking for quite some time, I was kind of excited for this new Western adventure film. To put it into context, we have to go back and explain how Costner got from here. He's been an adventurous filmmaker and actor for quite some time now. Dances with Wolves is still regarded as one of the best historical fiction films of the last few decades. Now, I'm going to be right up front with you guys, I've actually never seen Dances with Wolves. There have been arguments back and forth on whether or not the film has aged well. I can't speak on that, but what I can tell you is from the clips that I've seen before, I feel like that film is pretty earnest. Costner's directorial career has been proven to be with some ups and downs. Postman was a commercial flop, while Open Range has been divided amongst the Costner stans. Costner himself has gone through failure in the film industry a few years times in a row, extending from the films just like Waterworld, which was a total box office disaster and critically panned. It has its fans too, but again, it all comes down to whether or not Costner still has the juice to make something bold and pretty epic. Hence why his new film series Horizon: An American Saga is supposed to be a return to form. It's supposed to be a film that is supposed to throw it back to the old days of classical Hollywood cinematic storytelling. You know, the good old westerns where you can tell who the bad guys are and who are the good guys. Horizon: An American Saga is split into two parts. I've only seen the first part, but the second part is set to be released in August, a few weeks apart from each other. Costner has laid the groundwork for this film series to be a cinematic experience. Now here's the thing, I have to be really honest and lay down my feelings about this new film series that Costner's trying to do. So let me explain. I don't think this film series is set to be what it is intended to be. So I'm going to highlight some of the problems that I have with this film and why I think Costner has a great chance to improve all of my grievances with the first part and the future entries. So let's get into it.
There will come a payday, hallelujah, what a payday.
The Western genre has been mostly based on tropes. If you see most of the popular Westerns out there, you'll understand most of the tropes that Costner has implemented in this new film. Horizon: An American Saga Chapter 1 is split into 3 storylines. One storyline deals with the settlers' ongoing struggles to survive as the Indians slaughter an entire settlement. Another storyline deals with a near-mute hero and how he survives and saves a prostitute from the bad guys. And the third storyline deals with a group of people fighting back against the Indians as they go town to town slaughtering. Now that's 3 storylines introduced in a nearly 3-hour film. Costner takes his sweet time installing all of these storylines, so much that the film introduces a 4th storyline that takes place in the sizzle reel. But before I get ahead of myself, I have to go back to the trope allegations. Costner, for whatever reason, has decided to implement pretty much every single trope that a Western has ever done in this film. You have the good main guy who's sort of mysterious and mute. He doesn't have a lot of backstory, but it is communicated for him to be some sort of troubled man. I'll stop right there because Costner's character doesn't really show up until the end of the first hour of the film. Instead, we are left with a very painfully long opening dealing with the settlers and their fight against the Indians. The Indians in this are portrayed as what you expect them to be. They're dressed in loin clothing, have feathers in their hair, and speak in a language that no one in the film understands. There's even one point in the beginning of the film where a lone man and his encounter with another stock character, and they're just basically complaining about Mexicans and how they speak in a different language. You can probably tell what Costner's trying to do with all that in mind. But I think what is truly insulting is Costner's boomer mentality when it comes to portraying certain types of characters in this. The Indians only have one mode, and that is, of course, to be just fucking evil. And to be the enemy of basically all the main characters, so you don't really get to see any of the flawed details with a lot of these Indian characters. Instead, we are left with them to act like what you expect them to be. They're dumb, they can be easily manipulated by the white man. That is the first trope that bothered me. It's also funny to see what Costner was trying to do with having it both ways in terms of being historically accurate and to also appeal to an older demographic. I'll get to the point a little bit later in this video, but the black and white hats are also a part of the trope allegations. And the wife who has a troubled past is another trope that is utilized in this film. And also finally, Costner has decided to portray most of the women characters as throwaways, as Abby Lee's character plays a prostitute who has to flee from her town after Hayes, Kevin Costner's character, guns down the wrong bad guy. Unfortunately, Abby's character is thrown around with no agency or a will to stand up for herself. Costner pretty much does the same thing with Sienna Miller's character, except she's a housewife who just falls in love with an American soldier, played by Sam Worthington. None of the women characters have a third dimension to their roles. They're placed just as pawns to further advance this non-story. Again, going back to the tropes, Western women are only used to either push a male character into a love story or just as prop. There's no in-between. Costner is trying to entertain both the older demographic and the newcomers of the genre, and he unfortunately fails at both by trying to court these demographics. This film will only work for some who like westerns that have the over-the-top tropey scenarios. These are some of the gripes that I have with this first part of the series. Again, maybe it'll change in Chapter 2, but I don't really see it, man. Horizon Chapter 1 relies heavily on build-up. Costner is trying to make his damnedest attempt to make this work in a 3-hour runtime, and he just completely loses the plot as we have to suffer through 3 storylines that don't go anywhere. All 3 of the main plot points start and end at a beginning point, as almost if this film is entirely structured like a miniseries on television. Now here's the thing, I can totally understand what Costner's trying to do with this being split into several parts. The film is shot like a television show. Costner was on Yellowstone for a few years and was the main character on that for some time now. He left prematurely to finish this project, and he's been trying to make this for the past couple years now. If you try to put 2 and 2 together, I think Costner is trying to make this an episodic tale that spans multiple chapters, and by telling that story, you basically have to slow everything down just to have the speed of the older demographic, and it just operates weirdly like an episode of a TV show. So much so that the film stops to basically showcase what is going to happen next after the Chapter 1 with a sizzle reel. And the reel starts to reveal itself, as Costner doesn't really give a fuck about the younger generation's attention to speeding up the film. Instead, Costner wants to tell the story in such a profound way that he has to set everything entirely on the notion that everything on the screen is very important and it will work towards the next set of films. And I mean by the next set of films because this film series is actually going to go for actually 4 instead of 2 films. Costner is allegedly shooting the 3rd installment right now as I talk about this. That to me seems like this first part is sort of wasted, and it's kind of like that. Everything is just development within development within development within development. Even the introduction of the 4th storyline in this is unneeded development on its own merits. This is another reason why I think this film series is going to fail. Costner has no intentions of strengthening the story by cutting away the unnecessary excess of his film. Instead, he's guessing that some of the audience will continue with the story after the first part. I truly believe that if he worked a little bit more on the storylines and cut a lot of like the excess, I think this first part would have been strong, and it might actually would have led to the second part and it being a bit harder. But I couldn't care less about any of the storylines nor any of the main characters in this, and that to me is pretty fucked up.
Country boy, I love you.
Just like I mentioned before in my Letterboxd diary entry for this film, I think Costner has a chance to improve himself with the next entry. I want to see how bad it can get from here, or it can improve, mostly. I don't personally think that this film warrants to be on the big screen. Before anyone jumps at me in the comments, let me just say this. I think Costner is trying to let this film series play out on the big screen so that when it finishes its theatrical run, it can just go straight to HBO Max for the stragglers who lost out on the theatrical experience. This works perfectly on television, with all the chapter breaks and all. TNT and TBS would just love playing this film on multiple hours upon the day. It's not really an insult to lay that opinion on thick, but that's my opinion. And there are tons of westerns that are shot very cinematically that deserve the theatrical experience. All I can remember is that film Bone Tomahawk and how it was tailored towards a modern audience, but it also really felt classical and modernist at the same time. Horizon Chapter 1 fails to be part of the cultural zeitgeist, at least for now. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching.